You're standing in front of someone who is completely unhinged. Their face is red. Their voice is rising. They're throwing accusations, insults, maybe even personal attacks designed to wound you at your core. And in that moment, you have a choice. The old you would have matched their energy. The old you would have raised your voice, defended yourself, maybe even said something you'd regret for years. The old you would have handed them exactly what they wanted, your composure, wrapped in a bow. But that's not who you're going to be after this video. Because what if I told you that the most powerful people in history, emperors, generals, philosophers who shaped civilization itself, they all knew something about arguments that you don't. They knew that the person who speaks the most loses. They knew that silence, strategically deployed, is more devastating than any comeback. And they knew 5 specific phrases, cold, calculated, devastatingly effective, that end conflicts before they even begin. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, never meant for anyone to read, "The best revenge is to be unlike your enemy." He wasn't talking about being passive. He wasn't talking about being weak. He was talking about something far more dangerous. He was talking about becoming so internally fortified that no one could ever drag you into their chaos again. Today, I'm going to hand you 5 verbal weapons forged in Stoic philosophy. 5 replies so cold, so psychologically precise, that most people won't even understand why they work. But you will. By the end of this video, you'll possess what I call the disengagement protocol, a systematic approach to verbal conflict that transforms you from a reactor into a strategist. The average man argues. The Stoic man dismantles. Let's begin. The philosophy of verbal power. Before I give you these 5 phrases, you need to understand why most people lose arguments, even when they're right. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Every argument you've ever lost, you lost before you opened your mouth. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who was born a slave and became one of the most influential thinkers in human history, taught a concept that changes everything. He said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." But here's what most people miss about this teaching. He wasn't just talking about accepting hardship. He was talking about psychological warfare. He understood that the moment you react emotionally, you have handed your opponent control over your internal state. You have made them the master of your mind. Think about that. When someone provokes you and you explode, who's actually in control? Not you. You've become a puppet, and their words are the strings. The Stoics developed what I call the cognitive shield, a mental framework that separates you from the chaos of other people's emotions. This shield doesn't make you cold. It makes you untouchable. And the 5 phrases I'm about to teach you, they're not just words. They're the verbal expression of that shield. Let me show you how to use them. Cold reply number 1. You might be right. Read that again. You might be right. 3 words. 4 syllables. And it completely short-circuits the human brain. Here's why this works at a neurological level. When someone attacks you verbally, they're expecting one of 2 responses. They expect you to fight back, which gives them something to push against. Or they expect you to crumble, which gives them victory. Their entire nervous system is primed for conflict. But when you calmly say, "You might be right," you create what psychologists call a pattern interrupt. Their brain literally doesn't know what to do next. They prepared a speech. They rehearsed their points. They were ready for war. And you just agreed? But here's the genius. You didn't actually agree. Read the words carefully. You might be right is not you are right. It's an acknowledgement of possibility. Nothing more. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine 2 generals on a battlefield. One general lines up his entire army, ready to charge. The other general simply walks away. The first general is left standing there with all his weapons, all his soldiers, and no one to fight. His aggression has nowhere to go. It turns inward. It becomes confusion. This is verbal aikido, using your opponent's energy against them by refusing to provide resistance. Seneca wrote about a man who was being publicly insulted at a gathering. Instead of responding, the man simply nodded and said, "You may know things about me that I do not know about myself." The crowd fell silent. The insulter was humiliated, not by a clever comeback, but by unshakable calm. How do you apply this? Next time someone comes at you with criticism, accusations, or an argument they're clearly invested in winning, pause. Let a full second of silence hang in the air. Then say, quietly and without emotion, you might be right. Then stop talking. Don't explain. Don't justify. Don't add a but. Just let it sit there. The average person will desperately try to fill that silence to keep the argument alive. The Stoic lets the silence do the work. Cold reply number 2, I'll think about that. This phrase is a door that closes quietly. Most people don't realize that arguments continue because both parties keep feeding them. Every defense, every counterpoint, but actually, it's all fuel on a fire that should have been starved. I'll think about that removes the fuel. Here's the psychology. When someone makes a point and you immediately counter it, you signal that you are never really listening. You were just waiting for your turn to attack. This escalates conflict because the other person feels unheard, and unheard people get louder. But when you say, I'll think about that, you signal something completely different. You signal that their words have weight, that you're not dismissing them, that you're taking them seriously enough to reflect. And here's what they don't realize. You haven't promised anything. You haven't agreed to change your behavior. You haven't admitted fault. You've simply said you'll think. That's it. You're committing to nothing but internal reflection, something they have no control over. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived Nazi concentration camps and went on to write Man's Search for Meaning, understood this at the deepest level. He wrote, "Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." I'll think about that is you claiming that space. It's you refusing to be forced into an immediate reaction. It's you saying, without saying it, I operate on my own timeline, not yours. Here's a scenario. Your partner accuses you of never listening, never caring, of being selfish. The foolish man would defend, that's not true, I did X, I did Y. Remember when and now you're in a courtroom, presenting evidence to a judge who's already made up their mind. The Stoic says, I'll think about that. Then you actually think about it. Later, when emotions have cooled, you can have a real conversation. But in that heated moment, you've closed the door without slamming it. You've maintained your dignity while leaving room for future resolution. This is the emotional ceasefire, a temporary halt in conflict that prevents casualties. Cold reply number 3, I understand you see it that way. Listen carefully to this phrase because it's a masterpiece of psychological precision. I understand you see it that way. You are not saying they're right. You are not saying you agree. You're not even saying their perspective is valid. You are simply acknowledging that they have a perspective. That's it. That's all. But to the person hearing it, it feels like validation. Their nervous system calms slightly because they feel heard. Yet you've surrendered nothing. This is what I call the recognition without concession technique. You're giving them the emotional validation they need to de-escalate while maintaining your position completely intact. Here's why this is so powerful. Most arguments aren't actually about facts. They're about feelings. The person attacking you usually wants to feel understood more than they want to be right. When you say, I understand you see it that way, you're addressing the emotional need without engaging with the logical content. Marcus Aurelius wrote extensively about this. He reminded himself, whenever you are about to find fault with someone, ask yourself the following question. What fault of mine most nearly resembles the one I am about to criticize? This wasn't about self-flagellation. This was strategic empathy. By acknowledging that others have their own perspective, shaped by their own experiences, wounds, and beliefs, you stop treating them as enemies to defeat and start seeing them as humans to navigate around. Let me give you an example from modern life. You're in a meeting. A colleague publicly questions your competence on a project. The foolish man would get defensive, start listing accomplishments, maybe even attack back. Now you've created a political enemy. The Stoic looks at the colleague with steady eyes and says, I understand you see it that way. Let's discuss specifics after the meeting. What just happened? You acknowledge their perspective without validating it. You moved the conflict out of the public arena, and you positioned yourself as the mature professional while they looked petty. That's not weakness. That's battlefield strategy. Cold reply number 4. This isn't worth damaging our relationship. Now we're getting into advanced territory. This phrase does something remarkable. It changes the frame of the entire conversation. When someone argues with you, they've created a frame. This is about who's right and who's wrong. They've made it a competition. But when you say, this isn't worth damaging our relationship, you've destroyed their frame and built a new one. Now the conversation isn't about winning. It's about what matters. And here's the psychological gut punch. If they continue arguing after you've said this, they're implicitly saying that being right is more important to them than your relationship. They become the aggressor. You become the reasonable one. This is the frame elevation technique. You're taking the conversation from the battlefield to the temple, from war to wisdom. Seneca was a master of this. He wrote letters to his friend Lucilius, coaching him on navigating difficult people. In one letter, he explains that the wise man asks himself, what is actually at stake here? Is this worth my peace? Most arguments, when you zoom out, are about absolutely nothing that will matter in a week, a month, a year. Two people screaming about who forgot to do a chore. A debate about politics that will change no one's mind. A disagreement about facts that could be resolved with a 10-second search. And yet people sacrifice relationships for these crumbs. When you say, this isn't worth damaging our relationship, you're demonstrating a higher vision. You're showing that you see the bigger picture. And that kind of perspective is rare. It's attractive. It commands respect even from those who disagree with you. A story. Two brothers haven't spoken in 15 years. Their mother died, and they fought over the inheritance, not even a large sum. Just enough to wound egos and ignite old resentments. If either one had said, this isn't worth losing my brother over, they would have saved 15 years of silence. 15 years of missing each other's lives. The wise man asks, will this matter on my deathbed? If the answer is no, he deploys this phrase and moves on. Cold reply number 5, strategic silence. This final technique isn't a phrase at all. It's the absence of one. And it might be the most powerful weapon in your arsenal. Here's what you need to understand. Not every provocation deserves a response. In fact, most provocations are explicitly designed to get a response. They're fishing hooks, and your reaction is the fish. The Stoics understood silence as a form of strength that most people cannot comprehend. Epictetus taught, silence is safer than speech. But he meant something deeper than just avoiding trouble. He meant that when you speak, you give people data. You reveal your emotional state, your priorities, your vulnerabilities. Every word is information that can be used against you. Silence reveals nothing. Silence is a wall without windows. When someone attacks you and you simply look at them, maintain eye contact, and say nothing, it is psychologically devastating. Because now they're forced to sit with their own words. They hear how those words sounded without any distraction. And often, they don't like what they hear. I call this the silence threshold, the practice of determining what is and isn't worth the expenditure of your words. Think of it like this, your words are gold coins. Every time you speak, you spend them. The foolish man throws coins at every beggar and merchant, always reacting, always explaining, always justifying. By the end of the day, he's poor. The Stoic is wealthy because he spends only when the return is worth the investment. Here's how this looks in practice. Someone insults you publicly. The room is watching. The foolish man scrambles to respond, to defend his honor, to prove something. But the wise man does nothing. He maybe raises an eyebrow. He might let the faintest smile cross his face. Then he continues with what he was doing. The message is clear without being spoken. You are not significant enough to disturb my peace. That is dominance. Not through aggression, through complete, unshakable self-possession. Marcus Aurelius, who was the most powerful man in the known world, practiced this constantly. He was surrounded by flatterers and critics, people trying to manipulate him with praise or provoke him with insults. His journals are filled with reminders to himself. Stop talking about what a good man should be. Just be one. Be. Don't explain. Don't defend. Just be. When you master strategic silence, you become untouchable. Because you've realized the deepest truth of Stoicism, your inner fortress requires no external validation. The moment you try to prove something to someone else, you've revealed that their opinion has power over you. Take that power back. Go silent. Watch them unravel. The transformation. Let me tie this together for you. You came into this video with a pattern. Someone attacks, you react. Someone criticizes, you defend. Someone raises their voice, you match it. That pattern has cost you. It's cost you relationships. It's cost you opportunities. It's cost you the most precious resource you have, your peace of mind. But now you have new tools. You might be right. The pattern interrupt. I'll think about that. The emotional ceasefire. I understand you see it that way. Recognition without concession. This isn't worth damaging our relationship. Frame elevation. And silence. The ultimate weapon. These aren't tricks. They're not manipulation tactics. They're the verbal manifestation of a Stoic inner life. They work because they come from a place of genuine inner strength. And the more you use them, the more that strength grows. Here's what I want you to understand as I close. 6 months from now, you could be a completely different person in conflict. Someone insults you, and you feel nothing, not because you're numb, but because you've realized their opinion cannot touch who you actually are. Someone tries to drag you into an argument, and you simply don't go. You smile, you deploy one of these phrases, and you walk away with your peace intact. That's freedom. That's what Marcus Aurelius had as emperor, surrounded by assassins and sycophants. That's what Epictetus had as a slave, with his body owned by another man, but his mind completely his own. That's what's available to you right now, today, and the next argument you face. The foolish man wins arguments. The wise man avoids needing to. And now you know how. Before you leave, I want you to remember one final thing. The phrases I've given you are useless without the inner transformation that makes them real. If you say you might be right through clenched teeth, seething with anger, it will ring false. People sense that. But if you say it from genuine peace, from a place where you truly have detached from the need to win, it becomes devastating. So the real work starts after this video. Practice. Not just the words, but the mindset. Meditate on the dichotomy of control, what you can control and what you cannot. Build your inner citadel until no one can breach it. And the next time someone tries to drag you into chaos, you'll know exactly what to do. You'll choose peace. And in that choice, you'll win everything. If this video has given you value, if something in here shifted how you think about conflict, subscribe. There's more coming. We're building a philosophy of strength here together. Until next time, stay unshakable.